Tell him he's dreaming.
Yeah.
Hey gang, I've got this Hogue Deka in Magnacut. I got it on Friday, it's Sunday evening now. I was going to do that first out of the box rope cut test. I just didn't have enough twisted sisal rope to be sure that I'd be able to finish the test. So I was like, oh, maybe tomorrow. And then I spent the weekend doing, pretty darn hard knife work. And I took this knife along to see how it would go, see how the edge would go. The exact nature of the work I was doing was re-flooring a dance studio. So that was lots of gouging out the putty that was filling the screw holes. So then you could smooth over it and not see the screw holes. So gouging all that out to set new screw holes and just that sort of work. And then slicing old, dirty, dusty putty that was filling the cracks of the floor, because the floor was just like a jigsaw of MDF yellow tongue boards. Slicing all that off as well. Amongst heaps of other jobs, I was scoring sandpaper, I was opening heavy plastic packages of things. It was a great weekend of legitimate knife use, the best kind of knife use, the knife use that isn't just done for the camera. Sadly, there isn't a camera with me while I'm doing legitimate knife use, so you just have to believe that it happened. But anyway, I'm mainly interested to see how the Magnacut has gone. So I've got this bit of test scrap paper. I wouldn't be surprised with a few hiccups in it, but let's just see how, after no touch-ups and a lot of hard work against hard surfaces, see how it still goes. Pretty darn good. Pretty darn good indeed. There is a certain roughness to it, but this would continue. If I was doing an edge retention test, this would continue the edge retention test. I would not yet stop at that level. It's slightly bumpy, but otherwise pretty darn excellent, given that the Leatherman charge that I took at the same time and sort of would sub in every now and then when I was worried that the thing would just break this knife. Because this knife, I must say, feels very light use because of the very light handle plastic. So I'd use my Leatherman charge a bit as well, and that's completely dull. Like that wouldn't cut shit right now, and that was used a lot less. And yeah, a lot less sort of against lots less cutting jobs. There's more kind of for prying and gouging and other stuff. Anyway, really, really cool start of the review. 2 days of legit knife use, and it's still bloody sharp. But I never feel like I truly know a knife or a steel until I've sharpened it myself and done an edge test with the knife. So that's going to be the next stage of this review of the Hogue Deka in Magnacut. American-made knife. I would say it's the competitor for the Bugout. It's about $20, $30 cheaper than a Bugout, an S30V. So let's just soldier on and see if this is the crazy good deal that, at least compared to the Bugout, it seems to be. Stay tuned. So what do we get for our 120 odd US dollars from DOT Trading? That's how much I paid anyway. You get a very thin, I would guess about 2.5 mil Magnacut blade with a pair of black thumb studs on a black FRN style polymer, very lightweight feeling plastic. Feels like Grivery. Can't remember which of the ones they say it is. I'll put it on the screen perhaps. And then you get a deep carry pocket clip and a crossbar lock, which is what everyone's calling the axis lock on a knife that's not from Benchmade these days. It's got 3 back spaces keeping it apart. There is a slight bit of skeletized metal linering under about this portion of the knife here. That's just to keep the lock housed there, because there's some springs and it just generally needs a bit more strength around it than just the simple plastic would afford on its own. But apart from that, it is basically a lineless knife. There is a little bit of flex in the handles if you squeeze them, but I'm sure the plastic, as most modern handle plastics are, is pretty strong and capable stuff. So I guess time will tell, and I'll certainly be using this knife. So if it feels worse than it sort of initially seems, then I'll certainly let you know. But very sort of simple ingredients, but it's got the ingredients that I care most about. It's a pretty low profile, unassuming looking knife, which is what I like a lot. And it has a very thin blade with a pretty high flat grind on it. It feels relatively okay behind the edge. I saw a few comments, people suggesting these were thick behind the edge. It certainly doesn't feel it. It feels about on par with something from Spyderco or Benchmade. And it certainly has cut very, very well in its initial testing anyway. So overall, pretty impressed with it at first, but I will certainly note that this feels very, very lightweight and, you know, just a bit like how the Bugout does, a little on the, you know, cheap side, but that's just, it could even be just an attribute of the plastic feeling that way because it is just so darn light. The only other initial sort of thought I have is that the plastic is fairly lippy along the channel where the knife folds. And then on the back, slightly lippy as well, but mainly on this side here, it's just a rough sort of sudden corner transition all along there, which when you bear down initially, you can somewhat feel. You can smooth that out with sandpaper or whatnot, but just another, again, byproduct of having a pretty low cost plastic frame to get, I think, what is really a pretty economical price for Magnacut on a good US made knife into your hand. So this Magnacut stopped at 500 cuts, which is, I think, a little bit lower than usual. So that might be my sharpening. I did use this new Work Sharp sharpener, or it could just be a softer treatment of it or whatever. 500 cuts is still, you know, great. Definitely a league above, you know, S35 VN, what those sorts of steels will do. But I've had M390 cut more fairly recently from a knife from Bestech. So, you know, it's definitely not class leading either. So Magnacut, you know, in my past has done much more as well. So yeah, just interesting. Could be the edge, could be the steel. I might just resharpen it. Might resharpen it as I normally would. This system is good, but I'm perhaps still feeling it out. So we'll just do another test on it, I think, because I'm just not quite happy. If it still stays in the 500 or so range with another sort of polished edge, then maybe it's just the steel is a bit softer or less abrasive resistant version of Magnacut. But if I can get better, then it's probably just down to me and my sharpening job. I don't usually use a ceramic hone to finish my blades. I'm usually just straight from high grit diamond to leather strop. So maybe it's that, don't know. 800. Ah. Or only just, but rules is rules. It's skipping and stopping and grating, so 800 be the number this time. Yeah, so there you have it. That was definitely a me issue. It was sort of one of my pioneer sharpenings on the new Work Sharp kit, and I just don't think I went for long enough, or maybe just the KME can get a much higher finish that affects Magnacut very positively. I mean, this is a beautiful looking edge, so it's definitely that, and that's about the realms of what you'd expect Magnacut to do, given my previous experience. And this is production, pretty much big box Magnacut, so just a testament to why this steel is just so hype, because it's warranted. And especially for a steel that's not going to rust particularly easily at all and is going to be relatively tough as well. I don't know, there's just definitely a school of thought that this should be the new S35 VN once it's cheap enough, I suppose. So yeah, amazing performance, on, well sharpened Magnacut. So even that previous 500, that would be about probably what you'd get on a slightly better than factory edge. So even if you're not that great at sharpening, you'll be able to get your Magnacut cutting 500 bits of this horrible rope before it's even slightly dull. So come on. So for the review part of this video, does this knife take down the Bugout? Because basically by its sheer existence is exactly what it's aiming for. To knock the Bugout off the top of that specific type of EDC knife class. So the ultralight style knife, thin blades, very budget feeling plastic handles with, even a little bit of give in both of them. It's got all those same things that the Bugout has. The main thing here is obviously going to be in this end here, the steel, the Magnacut. And also, I guess somewhat endearingly, it does come in a few different blade shapes and whatnot as well. But generally speaking, this is taking aim at the Bugout, doing exactly what the Bugout does, but having a way better steel than S30V. Like you'll notice, even as a layperson, you'll notice Magnacut's benefits over S30V. All the hard work I did with this knife when I first got it, S30V wouldn't have behaved as well as the Magnacut did. Magnacut does have that extra toughness and extra edge retention to make it a real performer. So that alone for me is enough to say, yeah, this absolutely and comfortably knocks the Bugout out of, at least the undisputed top spot of the ultralight knives. That being said, it's not a perfect knife. So I don't mind the scales that squeeze together. What I did, the two things I didn't particularly love about the Deka, and these aren't world breaking for me. I'll still very much carry this and use it as an EDC knife. It's definitely allowed to live in the house. It's not going to be consigned to the drawer or anything like that. But two things. The style of sort of thumb stud they've chosen to operate the lock with is a little bit on the rough side in terms of that it really does catch. It's got the standard sort of ziggurat type steeped declines that a lot of these these locks sort of have. It's also got a couple of chunks taken out of it, obviously for maximum grip, so to speak. It's a slightly protruding button. It doesn't need maximum grip at all. Like even a slightly rough surface will do absolutely fine, because you literally drag your fingers down the plastic, wait till they catch anything, and then pull, and that's how the lock's actuated. You don't need this much grip on it. What the grip actually does do is when you're really bearing down on the knife, say if you're, somewhat autistically cutting rope with it over and over again, but even in more general terms, and I did notice this when I was using it in the legitimate, knife use as well, not just the video type knife use, it does form a bit of a hot spot on both sides of the knife, depending on obviously grips and whatnot, but they are pretty rough little thumb studs there. So that's something. And also the thumb studs to actuate the blade, I think I'm just going to leave them off because they're a little bit too tall and they do interfere with sharpening on an angled system, which is what maybe a very specific to me problem, but it does definitely interfere with an angled system. They're taller thumb studs than I think they need to be as well. You could lower them by about a third and people would find them. I wouldn't worry too much about that. So too rough on the axis or the bar locking button, and just a little bit high, a little bit big on the thumb stud to deploy the blade as well. They're the two main things that I would change about the knife. Everything else about it I'm absolutely fine with. I like the sort of subtle-ish texture on the Grivery style plastic or whatever sort of modern super plastic this is. I really love the thin blade. It's such a nice, thin, slicey blade. The behind the edge thickness is not too bad. I'd read people sort of commenting that these were thick behind the edge. Maybe my sharpening to 17 degrees just sorted that right out. But realistically speaking, it's a pretty decent performer. It can do things like the vinyl tubing cut really easily. So vinyl tubing, this stuff here is, you need a sharp knife to get through it. Anything slightly obtuse just does not, you have to really work your way through it. Even with a sharp knife, it's not fun cut. So does that absolutely fine, as good as most of my other blades. And yeah, generally speaking, a high flat grind is fine as long as it's on thin stock, which this absolutely is. I'll run some knife comparison shots in while I'm talking, I suppose. I guess the main thing is, do I love it as like a pure EDC knife? I mean, I don't care particularly about a knife's weight. I compare it to a knife's size, and this does do what I like a knife to do, which is be thin in the pocket this way, as in not a tall knife sideways. So it does do that quite well. It's got a good deep carry clip, so it carries and handles really well. I wouldn't mind if it was a bit heavier. I would probably prefer if they did put full liners on it. It might make it feel a little bit more substantive. Never bothered me too much, and doesn't bother me that you can squeeze the grips together or whatever. It doesn't fuss me either. Just being ultra lightweight isn't for me, but I know it is for some people, so that's fine too. I still like my TRM Neutron more than this, even steel aside. This is probably the best piece of Magnacut you can get for the money at the moment. Having a really thin, pretty apparently well heat treated Magnacut blade on an American-made knife for $120 to $130, when Benchmade are getting ridiculous with their prices, and I think we're at almost at $170 Bugout or something crazy. This is a knife made in the same country using better materials or the same materials, and it's, even if you change this, if you ran this in the Bugout both with VG10 steel and didn't tell you, you wouldn't really notice any better performance in either of them. I think the Bugout may have a slight comfort edge on the really hard grips, because I don't remember the Bugout bar lock being as rough as this one is, but that might be the only slight advantage the Bugout has. But in terms of material advantages, price advantages, you really got to give it to the Hogue Deka Magnacut. It's really, I think, class leading in this little specific niche of EDC blades. But I still like my mainstays a little bit more. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you found all the testing and whatnot interesting. I've got some more Magnacut testing coming up. I'm gonna try and make Magnacut rust is my goal for the week. So I'm gonna see how that goes. So thank you, and I'll see you all in the next film. Goodbye.